We're going to go ahead and review the principles that we've learned about font and text properties and bring them together in one file. So I have a basic HTML, XHTML file that we'll be working with, and this is what it looks like in the browser. It basically only has a style to define the font, and that is pretty much it. If we look in the XHTML, HTML, you can go ahead and you can see that the file is pretty straightforward. I'm going ahead and I've specified the font on my body tag. And that's the only style that I've specified. And then it's just a combination of an H1 tag, H2 tag, several paragraph tags. I have a null link in here. I have several links. We'll be styling those, and that's pretty much it. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to format this so it's easier to read, and we're going to review some of the things that we learned in this week's topics. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to create some styles for my H1 and H2 tags. So I'll come up here into my style area, and I'm going to go ahead and define a style for the H1. So the first thing I want to do is I want to go ahead and define the color for my H1. And I'm going to be using 063. I'm also going to use letter spacing, and let's go ahead and set the letter spacing to 0.7 ems. And I'm also going to go ahead and set the font variant to be small caps. And let's just go ahead and do the H2 tag as well, and then we'll go check out and see what we've done in the browser. So I'm doing my opening, closing curly braces for my H2 tag. For H2, we're going to use a text align of center, and we're going to go ahead and use word spacing of 0.8 ems. And let's save our file, and we'll go back here into the browser and refresh our page, and you can see that my So Tasteroo title has been changed color. It's also changed the letter spacing and the changed it to small caps, and then my H2 tag has been centered, and if I resize the browser you can see that that's always going to stay centered right here. And it's also changed the word spacing and spaced that out a little bit. I'm going to come down here and I'm going to go ahead and define a style for my paragraph tags next. So I'll do an opening style for my P, and let's go ahead and let's set our font size to begin with. I'm going to set my font size to 0.75 ems. And we'll go ahead and use a line height, and the line height is going to be 1.5 ems, so we'll space out the lines between the paragraphs. And let's do a text indent as well. So our text indent is going to be 1.75 ems, and let's justify the text as well. So I'm going to do a text align, and I'm going to go ahead and set that to justify. So if I save and refresh the page, you can see that now I get something like this. So my text is justified. Justifying text is a nice thing to do with paragraphs. It tends to make it fairly easy to read it, and you can see how we're changing the way this page looks quite a bit. Let's go ahead and let's set styles for our links next. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to set styles for both A and A colon link. And let's also set the A visited to the same property. So I'm going to go ahead and define all of those in one declaration. I will come in here and let's set the color of our links to be 069, which is a kind of a blue color right here. And let's go ahead and let's set the text decoration to none. We'll go ahead and we'll remove the underline. And then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to define a style for the hover as well. So let's do an A hover. And for the A hover, we'll go ahead and we'll have the text decoration come back, but let's do a text decoration of underline and overline. So I'm going to type underline, overline, and I just separate those with a space. I'm going to go ahead and save, and we'll come back to our page and we'll refresh the page so you can see that my links have all changed, and if I mouse over them I get an underline and an overline, so it kind of surrounds the content. So this is looking pretty good right here. Now what I want to do is I want to go ahead and I want to define some styles for I have some areas right here that I want to go ahead and make drop down some letters and bring some other letters up. So like right here I say enjoy, it should actually say hour, but we'll change that in a second. Enjoy our mountain spring water. And then I say it's 105 times better than tap water. And I want to actually cite this and put a little footnote right down here. So I'm going to go ahead and I want to drop the 2 down a little bit, and I want to bring the 1 up a little bit. So we'll go ahead and we'll make some changes to some of our styles here, so we can go ahead and do that. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to style my sub tag so I can do something for the superscript and the subscript. And let's go ahead and style the superscript to have a font size that is going to be a little bit smaller. So I'm going to go ahead and define it to be 65%. And I'm going to go ahead and change my vertical alignment as well. And I'm going to go ahead and change the vertical alignment to 35%. Now, let's go and change that little spelling error that I found. Let's see, enjoy our mountain spring water is what it should say right there. So I'm going to go ahead and change that to an R instead of out. And then the next thing that we're going to want to do down here is we're going to want to go ahead and we're going to want to add in the super and the subscripts so that we can style this appropriately. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put a superscript tag around the 2 right here. So I'll come to the 2 and I'll open up a superscript tag, and then I'm going to come to the other side of the 2 and I'm going to close the superscript tag. And I'll save my file, and if we refresh, you can now see, okay, now I've raised that up. I want to actually raise it down, so let's change that 35 to a -35, and that should do the trick for us there. Let's resave our page and refresh it in the browser, and now you can see I have a nice H2O where it's going to drop the 2 down, so that's much better, and that's actually how I want it to look. Let's go back to our page and let's define a style for our subscript. And we're going to put our subscript on our 1 right here. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to define, I'll actually just define the parentheses to be part of the subscript as well. So I'm going to go ahead and type sub, and then I'll do my closing sub tag here. And then of course we're going to have to define a style for this. So let's come back up into our style area, and I will go ahead and define a style for my subscript. And our subscript is basically going to use similar style to what we have here. I will go ahead and I'll use a font size of 65%, just like I used before. And let's go ahead and let's change the vertical alignment to, let's try 20%. So if I save this and I refresh it, you can see that now it makes this smaller and it raises it up a little bit. So that's looking more like I want it to look. I'm going to want to come down here and I'm going to want to do the same treatment on the 1 at the bottom. So I'm going to come down into my HTML code, and then I can go ahead and I can put the sub tag around this 1 right here, and then of course I need to close it. And so if we save and refresh, you can see that now it raises that up a little bit and makes it quite a bit smaller. That could probably come up just a tiny bit more, so we could go ahead and adjust that in the style. It's so easy to make these changes that you can just come in here and try different things. So if I change that to 30 and reload, you can see it just brings these up a little bit, which actually looks a little bit better. So we'll leave it like that. The next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to make this paragraph right here a little bit smaller, because since it's my footnote, it doesn't need to be as big as the others. So that paragraph happens to be just a paragraph tag. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go ahead and I'll create a class. I'll go ahead and assign the class to the paragraph right now. So I'm going to go ahead and assign a class, and we'll name the class custom small. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to come up here and I will define a style for my custom small text. So I'll just put dot custom small. I'm going to open and close my curly braces, and looks like I didn't spell that right, which could be problematic. So let me just take care of that real quick. We'll go ahead and we'll change the font size to be a little bit smaller. I'm going to size it with percent, so let's try 70%. And then we're going to go ahead and change the font style. And let's make the font style italic. And let's go ahead and change the color of this. Since it's more of a footnote, it doesn't need to be quite as important. Let's just change it to a lighter gray shade. So if I save and refresh this in the browser, you can see how now this gets a little smaller, it's gray, and it's italicized. The last thing I'm going to include is I'm going to go ahead and just make a change to some text in here. I'm going to go ahead and here in my web page where I say call for current 2007 mailer and price list, let's just strike that out. And again, this this might not be the best use of this, like you probably would just change it to 2008, but since we want to practice using the different styles that we learned, I'm going to go ahead and strike out the 2007. So let's go ahead and let's make a style for strike. So I'm going to go ahead and call this one strike, and I'll open close my curly brace like so. And then what I'm going to want to do is I'm going to want to change my text decoration. And my text decoration is going to change to the line through. And then what I need to do is I need to come into my page and I need to define a class. So right down here I say call for current 2007. Let's strike out 2007. Because this is an inline element, I'm going to create a span tag, and I'll go ahead and set a class, and I'm going to make the class equal to strike. And then I'm going to close the span tag on the other side of my 2007 there. And then what I need to do is I need to type 2008. So we'll save that and let's refresh. And you can see that the 2007 gets striked out, and now this changes to 2008. So that's looking good. We basically have applied many of the principles that we went through in the previous lectures and kind of brought them all together, and you can see how they can all work together to make a page look quite a bit different and to really improve the readability and to add some additional typography settings that are going to make this look a lot more professional. The next example that I want to go ahead and go through with you is I want to set up the example that I showed at the beginning of this session's lecture notes, which was on just changing fonts altogether. So this is the page. Let me go ahead and just show you the final page really fast. I'll open it in my browser. So this is the page right here that it ends up looking like, and I believe I showed you this at the beginning of this session's lecture files on styling fonts with CSS. And I just wanted to show you how I created this. It's a really simple HTML page, and basically all of this is being generated by styles. I believe I mentioned before that some of these effects are things that probably won't look the same in all the browsers, because I am defining some properties that are a little ambiguous in that all the browsers aren't going to render them the same way. So if you're doing this in another type of browser, you might not get the exact same results, but you can kind of see some of the limitations of using this. So we'll just do this really quickly. This is what the final page looks like, and this is what it looks like with no styles. It's basically just 3 paragraph tags. So if we look at our HTML is extremely simple. I just have paragraph tags for the 3 lines of text. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and we're going to use CSS to style these lines of text and make them look completely different. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to set a global style for everything in my document, and I'm going to set my margin and padding to 0. And the reason that I'm using the universal tag right here is just because I want to be able to zero out any of the properties that are going to, by default, work with my tags. So the body tag is going to get zeroed out. There's a little bit of default margin spacing on the top and on the bottom, and I also am going to go ahead and zero out my paragraph tag. So let's see, let me just open this in the browser. I don't think I have the right, there we go. Sorry about that, that wasn't the right file. So anyways, here's what it looks like once I've zeroed it out. You can see how all the text moves right to the top, and there's no space between my paragraphs. So I'm just going to set those things all to 0, and then I'm just going to go ahead and create some classes here that will define the way that these different lines look. So I'm going to start by defining a class for first line, and let's go ahead and let's set the font size. And I'm going to make it quite a bit bigger, so I'm going to use 4 M's. I'm going to change my font weight, and I'm going to make the font weight bold, and I'm going to change the color, and I'm going to change the color to a gray, and I'm going to change the font family, and let's go ahead and set the font family to Verdana or a sans serif in case Verdana is not available. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to set my margin to 0 pixels, and I'm going to go ahead and set my padding. Actually, I probably don't need to set my margin or my padding since we've already globally defined that. Let's go ahead and let's change the letter letter spacing to bring the letters in a little bit tighter. So I'm going to use a negative number. I'm going to use -5 pixels. Alright, let's see what that looks like. I'm going to go ahead and need to define a class for my first line right here. So we'll add a class in there, and the class is just going to be set to first line. So if I save my file and I refresh in the browser, you can now see that this first line takes on the properties that I just specified. It's a lot bigger. The font face has changed. The weight is now bold. The letters are closer together, and obviously the color has changed. So that's looking good. That's how I want that line to look. Let's go about styling the next line. So we'll go ahead and we'll create a style for the second line. So I'm going to call this one dot second line, open, close my curly brace, and let's go ahead and set styles here. Go ahead and let's set the font family, and we'll set the font family on this line to Georgia, or a serif font if Georgia font is not available. Let's go ahead and let's set the font size. And I'm going to go ahead and set my font size to, again, a fairly large size. I'm going to be using 5M. Let's set the color to, we're going to go ahead and use a shade of red, so I'm going to use 930. Let's go ahead and set the font weight, and I'm going to set the font weight to bold. And let's go ahead and let's set the left margin. So I'm going to type margin left. And let's set the left margin to 5 So that's going to indent that line from the left edge of the browser a little bit. And let's see what that looks like. So I'll save this up, and actually let's apply that class, or it's not going to look like anything. So we'll come in here and we'll assign the second paragraph to have a class of second line. And let me save my page, and we'll refresh here. And now you can see that this has changed. Let's change the font family a little bit on this and make it something that's a little more interesting. So instead of using Georgia font, let's use cursive here. This is one of the font families that you might, run into some issues as far as using this type of font family, because it's not going to always render the same on all the browsers. So as I said before, if you are using another browser, this might look a little bit different, but it's definitely kind of fun to experiment and see how it's going to affect your web page. So let's go in here and let's actually bring this up a little bit as well. I'm going to come back into second line, and I'm going to go ahead and set some of my padding and margin settings. Let's set our margin top to 0 pixels, and let's set our margin bottom to 0 pixels, and let's go ahead and set our line height to 0 pixels. And just to be sure, I'm just going to throw in a style for my padding, to set my padding also to 0 pixels. So let's see what effect that has on our page. You can see that that moves everything up, and that's what I want. I want this text to kind of overlay or overlap on the first line. So by making adjustments to those margin and padding settings, I can kind of bring this up a little bit, which is what I want. Alright, so that line's now looking along the lines of what we'd like to see. We'll go ahead and we'll create a final style for this page. And again, I'm going to define a class, and I'm going to call this one third line. And I'll open and close my curly brace like we've done in the past. And then we'll begin by assigning a font family. Let's go ahead and use our Georgia on this one, or a serif, and then let's go ahead and let's set the font size. And here let's use a font size of, we'll try 4 and then let's go ahead and let's set a font weight, and we'll assign bold to that. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to set a font variant here. And let's have the font variant be set to small caps. So small dash caps will do that trick for that. And let's change the color. And for this one, we will go ahead and use a gray as well, but a little different shade, a little darker shade of gray. I'm going to come in here and I'm going to assign a property for line height, and let's set the line height to let's try 0.95 I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to specify my left margin, and my left margin is going to be 1.25 and then finally I'm going to go ahead and tighten up the letter spacing a little bit. So letter spacing, I'm going to set that to -3 pixels. And let's save and refresh in the browser. Oh, I forgot to assign the class. That doesn't do us much good at all, does it? Okay, so let's come down here and assign the class, and this one is going to be assigned to third line. And now when we save and refresh in the browser, we should get some results. So now you can see that we've really changed what was a very simple page to something that is visually a lot different and a lot more interesting. We just did this with, 3 styles basically. So, experiment, have fun with setting these settings. You can really open up a more sophisticated world of typography using CSS with your web pages, and you can explore some of the different features that you're able to do with fonts.